I grew up in this place called Hollow Creek, the kind of town you'd see on a real estate flyer. Quiet, clean, all wide streets and neat lawns. Big houses spaced just far enough apart that nobody really had to talk to their neighbors. People called it peaceful. I always thought it was a little too peaceful, like the kind of quiet that only feels normal until you really stop to think about it. My best friend Reese lived just a few doors down. We didn't have much going on most days, especially during the school year. We'd just meet up, wander around, maybe hit up the gas station for junk food. Nothing ever really happened in Hollow Creek, and that was kind of the problem. Eventually, we started making our own fun. There was this massive old house up on a hill near the cemetery. Everyone just called it the Ridgway Mansion, though I doubt anyone actually knew who the Ridgways were. It had been empty for decades. Some local ghost stories about it, but no one really believed any of that. The place looked like it had been picked clean, walls tagged up with layers of graffiti, windows broken out, vines clawing their way up the sides. A real cliché, but it was ours. I don't even remember when we first went up there. It just became our spot over time. When there was nothing else to do, which was pretty much always, we'd head there. Climb up onto the roof, talk about stuff that didn't matter, maybe throw a tag up if we brought paint. It felt harmless, like the house was just this dead thing no one cared about. Sometimes we'd even joke about waking it up. I don't know why we said that. Maybe we were bored, maybe we weren't. It was one of those summer nights that just felt stuck. Hot, still, quiet, in a way that made everything feel heavier. Reese and I had been drinking a bit. Nothing wild, just enough to feel it. We were supposed to meet up with these girls from the next town over, but they bailed. No reason, no warning, just never showed. I remember sitting on Reese's porch, both of us just stewing in that weird combo of boredom and frustration that comes when a night's already slipping through your fingers. So like always, we defaulted to the mansion. It was pushing 1 a.m. by the time we got there. The hill leading up to that place always looked darker than it should have, even with the cemetery lights nearby. The usual routine kicked in. Grab a few rocks, try to hit a window, laugh like idiots when the glass shattered. It was dumb, but it was ours. That night though, it felt different, quieter somehow, like the air itself was holding its breath. Reese pointed at the attic window, tiny thing, way up top, barely visible in the dark, and said he was going for it. I watched him wind up and launch this one weird-looking rock, kind of flat with a faint Z scratched into one side. It sailed perfectly, shattered the glass with a sound that echoed way too far. And then, God, I hate remembering this, maybe 5 seconds later, that exact same rock hit the gravel right in front of us. Same shape, same scratch, like it had never even left. There's this moment your brain has when it short circuits, when logic checks out but nothing clicks. That was me, just standing there, heart starting to pick up, but still trying to believe it made sense somehow. It didn't, still doesn't. Looking back, I still can't explain why we went in after that. Maybe it was pride. Maybe we didn't want to seem spooked, or maybe we were just too used to treating that place like it was ours, like no one else would ever bother. It was the middle of the week, close to 1:30 a.m. by then, and the whole hill felt like it belonged to us. No reason to think otherwise, until there was. The front door was the same as always, half hanging, never fully shut. We ducked under the vines, stepped inside like we had 100 times before. Same rotted wood smell, same creaky floors. At first it felt familiar, almost routine. But not 5 minutes in, something changed. There was this slam, loud, sharp, and deep enough to rattle something in my chest. It echoed through the whole house. At first I thought maybe it was something falling, but it didn't sound like that. It sounded like the front door. Reese went to check it out. I hung back by the staircase, trying to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. But when he came back, I could tell immediately something was off. His face was tight, like he didn't know how to say what he'd just seen. He told me the door wouldn't budge, that it was stuck, jammed, or maybe locked from the outside. I laughed at first, told him he was probably just pulling it wrong, but he wasn't, and that laugh died quick. That's when I felt it, that shift. like the whole house had exhaled after holding its breath for too long, like we'd crossed some invisible line and suddenly weren't supposed to be there anymore. And I couldn't shake this thought. What if we were never alone in there to begin with? We didn't have a plan after the door thing. Just kind of drifted through the upstairs halls, hoping movement would keep the unease from setting in too deep. The upper floors had always been our territory, familiar graffiti tags, kicked-in drywall, broken glass crunching under our feet. It should have felt normal, but everything felt a few degrees off. That's when we saw it. Tucked way in the back, behind what looked like a section of crumbling wall, was this narrow staircase. Tight, steep, half covered by a splintered board, like someone wanted to hide it, or maybe just forgot it was there. But I swear it hadn't been there before. We'd explored every corner of this place over the years. And this was new. Reese looked at me like he expected me to tell him it was normal. I didn't. Still, we climbed it. Because we were stupid or bored, or because that kind of quiet dread doesn't fully sink in until later. The attic room we ended up in was small. Low ceiling, angled roof, barely lit. But the air hit me the second we stepped in. Thick, wet, almost sour. I gagged before I even realized what the smell was. Something was rotting up there. Not dead animal rotting either. Worse, there was a pentagram painted in white on the floorboards. Could have been a prank, could have been nothing. But there were candles too, stubs melted into old glass jars. The weird part was how clean the circle was, like it hadn't been touched by the grime of the rest of the house. And then there was the closet. Small, lopsided door in the corner, slightly cracked. The smell was coming from there. It was heavy, clung to the air. I didn't even go near it. Couldn't. Neither of us did. We just stood there, frozen, trying not to look like we were scared, but both knowing this wasn't some forgotten room. Someone had been here, maybe still was. I think I was the first one to say we should leave, but I don't even remember saying it. Just remember turning back toward the stairs like my body decided for me, and then stopping cold. There were two figures standing at the bottom, draped in black, hooded, completely still, like someone had pressed pause on them. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks, the kind of thing that happens when your brain wants to see people in shadows. But this wasn't that. I could hear them breathing, deep and steady, like they'd been waiting. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, frozen. Reese noticed a second later, and I felt him tense behind me. There was no question anymore. This wasn't our space. It had never been. We were guests, uninvited. Then the sound started from behind us. Fast, heavy, stomping up the narrow stairs. Not careful or quiet. Whoever it was, they weren't hiding. That's when panic really set in. My thoughts were scattered. Part of me still trying to believe it was a prank or some local kids messing with us. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't some thrown-together scare. These people had been here. Were still here. Like they lived in this rot, in this darkness, and didn't need to explain anything to us. What really sticks with me now is how calm they looked. Not shocked to see us. Not even mad. Just watching. Like they'd known we were coming. Like they'd seen it all play out already. I didn't know where to go or what to do. Everything inside me screamed to run, but I was stuck, like my body hadn't caught up to the danger yet. Reese didn't say a word, he just bolted for the attic window. I followed, but I hesitated right at the edge. That step out into the dark, onto a roof that looked way smaller than I remembered. It felt like the kind of choice you don't come back from, but I did it. I stepped out. We could barely see anything. No moonlight, no street lamps from this side, just black, with the occasional glint of glass or rusted nails. The shingles were loose under our feet, cracking, shifting with every step. We kept low, moving slow, heading toward the old hatch that led back down into the servants' wing. It was the only other exit we knew, and we didn't even know if it would open. When we got to it, it was worse than I expected. Bolted shut from the inside, like someone had gone out of their way to make sure we couldn't leave. I didn't think, I just stomped. Once, twice, hard. The wood cracked loud enough to echo, like it screamed for us. It gave on the third hit, the hatch blowing open with a splintered moan. I dropped through before I even looked. misjudged the distance, and slammed hard onto the old ladder. One leg bent wrong. Something popped. Pain lit up through my thigh like fire. I didn't even stop to check it. Reese was right behind me. He didn't fall, just dropped fast and yanked me up before I could process what happened. We didn't speak, we just moved. Down through the dust-choked corridors, past the rooms that didn't look right anymore, past walls that felt closer than before. I swear the house shifted while we were inside it. We didn't stop running until we hit the road. We didn't stop running until our feet hit the gravel paths of Hollow Creek Cemetery. That's what it was called. Hollow Creek, like the name was trying too hard to sound peaceful. That night, it felt like the only place in the world that didn't want to swallow us whole. We ducked behind some headstones near the back, crouched low in the grass. My leg was throbbing, but the pain barely registered. I remember thinking the names on the graves didn't look real, like props. Like none of this was real. We just sat there, barely breathing, watching the house from a distance. A few minutes passed, maybe more, and then we saw them figures moving around the mansion. 4, maybe 5, all dressed like the 2 we'd seen inside. Black clothes, hoods pulled low, flashlights flickering through the windows and around the perimeter like they were combing every inch. They didn't talk, didn't call out, just moved slow, coordinated. Like this wasn't new to them, like they'd done it before, and somehow that was worse than anything else. It meant this wasn't just a freak moment or some one-time break-in gone wrong. It meant we'd stumbled into something that had rules, patterns, something that didn't want to be seen, something that had already accounted for kids like us. We waited until their lights disappeared behind the west wing. Then we slid through a break in the fence, took the long way around, never looking back at the house even though I wanted to, needed to. Reese and I didn't really talk after that. Not about the mansion, not about that night. I think we both wanted to pretend it didn't happen. But the silence between us said otherwise. It never felt over. Still doesn't. This was back when I was pledging a frat during my sophomore year. Everyone said each pledge class had to do this one tradition, a trip to an abandoned hospital a couple towns over. I don't remember who brought it up first, but no one really questioned it. It was just one of those things you were expected to do. We met up in this weird park on the edge of town, one of those recreational areas with a bunch of trails, fields, not a single soul around at night. I didn't know the area at all. I had carpooled with Marcus, who I barely knew outside of pledge events. Honestly, I barely knew most of the guys that well. I just stuck close to Marcus because he seemed laid back. We waited in the parking lot until the rest of the group showed up, maybe 10, 12 guys total. Then we started down one of the trails, the kind that winds forever without letting you see where it actually leads. It was cold, and the air felt heavy in a weird way. I remember being annoyed because I wore my new white sneakers. Not even 5 minutes in, they were already getting wrecked by mud from the trail. Eventually the path veered into this patch of woods, just a short stretch, but thick enough to make the night feel darker. Then we saw it. The hospital. It looked massive, way taller than I'd imagined, like some relic from a different time. It just sat there behind the trees, swallowing the moonlight. Not a single light on. The windows were mostly intact, weirdly enough, but you could just tell. Nobody had touched this place in years, and yet it didn't feel completely empty. We didn't walk through the front doors or anything official like that. One of the guys, Tyler I think, led us around the side where there was this busted out window near the foundation. He said it had been that way for years. Some other pledge class had supposedly found it, and it became the usual entry point ever since. It looked small at first glance, but everyone started dropping down through it, one by one, like it was totally normal to just crawl into abandoned medical buildings on a random Friday night. I followed near the back, not because I was scared, just, I don't know, I wasn't in a rush to be the first one swallowed by the dark. The drop inside wasn't far, but the second my shoes hit the floor, I knew I'd made a mistake. Water, cold, stagnant water, pooled across cracked tiles. I could feel it soaking through the sides of my sneakers. I tried not to think too hard about what else might be floating around in it. The air was damp, smelled like rust, and something faintly sweet that didn't belong. The only light we had came from our phones, bouncing off rusted pipes and crumbling walls. The ceilings felt lower here, almost like the building was sagging in on itself. We couldn't tell what this part used to be. Maybe storage, maybe patient rooms, but everything was stripped bare. Still, being in a group made it easier to push past the nerves. There was this unspoken belief that nothing bad could happen if we all stuck together. Safety in numbers, right? Just a frat stunt, a dare, a creepy building, a little water on the floor. But even then, in that first room, something about the silence felt off, like the building was waiting. We took the stairs to the next floor, some old metal steps that groaned under every footfall. The whole group moved together, and for a second it felt like we were being way too loud. Our steps echoed off the walls like we were announcing ourselves. I don't know why, but I kept thinking about how sound travels differently in places no one's lived in for a long time, almost like it lingers longer than it should. I didn't say that out loud though, just kept climbing. Upstairs the place looked weirdly intact. No graffiti, barely any busted fixtures. Most places like this get trashed after a while. Kids break in, tag walls, steal stuff. But this didn't feel vandalized. It felt paused, like people had just walked out one afternoon and never came back. Some of the doors were still halfway open. A few papers scattered on the ground, brittle and yellowed. It messed with my head more than I expected. I'm not even sure when the group started breaking off. At first we were all moving together, sticking close. But then someone spotted a hallway and ducked off to the left. A couple others followed. A few more wandered into a side room. It wasn't a dramatic split. It just sort of happened. I stuck with Marcus. We didn't even say anything, just kind of veered off toward this hallway that curved slightly to the right. It was dimmer there, like the light from our phones didn't bounce back as much. We could still hear the others somewhere behind us. Muffled voices, footsteps, the occasional laugh. But even that started fading. I didn't feel lost. Not exactly, but the air felt different the moment it got quieter. Like the building noticed we were alone. We were heading up to another floor. I don't even remember why. We weren't looking for anything specific. Just wandering, following whatever looked more interesting. The stairwell was tighter than the first one. And colder somehow. The kind of cold that feels like it's been sitting in the concrete for years. That's when I saw it. Right on the step above us, a crumpled cloth. Looked like a towel or maybe an old rag. But something about it was off. The color was wrong. Not just dirty, but stained. A dark, reddish brown with patches that looked wet or almost wet. Not fresh, but not old enough to feel harmless either. I stopped without thinking. Just stood there staring at it. Marcus kept walking, stepping right past it like it wasn't even there. I almost said something, just a quick, "Hey, did you see that?" But nothing came out. I didn't want to draw attention to it. Not to the rag, not to myself, not to the fact that I was hesitating over something so small. There was a smear on the wall nearby. It started just beside the rag and dragged down along the stairs. Could have been anything, rust, paint, dirt, but it had this sticky look to it that didn't sit right with me. Like something had been pulled along, or maybe someone. I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe someone was in here before us and got hurt. Maybe this was just old trash that looked worse in bad lighting. That made sense. Kind of. But the more I stared at it, the more certain I felt someone else had been here. And not long before us. And whatever happened, it wasn't part of the frat tradition. One of the rooms we wandered into looked almost untouched, which made it worse, somehow. Most of the place had that abandoned, stripped bare feeling, empty shelves, broken glass, maybe a few scattered papers. But this room, the bed was still made. The old equipment was still set up like it had never been used. There was even a little monitor on a rolling stand in the corner, wires coiled beside it like someone had just stepped out for a break. It felt like walking into a freeze frame of someone's life, mid-collapse. I was standing near the doorway, not really talking, just taking it in, when I heard footsteps. Not ours, not Marcus's. These were quick and close, just outside the room. I looked up fast. For a second I didn't even breathe. There was a shape, someone moving past the doorway. Fast, just a flash. Not enough to make out a face or clothes or even a real outline. Just the motion, the feeling of a body cutting through space. I stepped into the hallway before I could think twice. At the far end, someone was standing there, perfectly still. Not close enough to make out details, but too far to feel normal. I couldn't tell if they were looking at me or facing the other way. Just there, solid, present. Then they moved, not away, not toward me, just sideways, into the next room like they knew exactly where they were going. No panic, no rush, like they lived there. I stood there, waiting to hear something, footsteps, a door creak, even breathing. Nothing came. I kept telling myself it had to be one of the guys, someone playing a joke, getting ahead of the group. But deep down I knew it wasn't. We were trying to loop back toward where we thought the others might be. I kept thinking I could hear them somewhere in the distance, voices bouncing through the halls, maybe a laugh, maybe someone calling a name. It's hard to tell in places like that. The sound has nowhere to go, so it just lingers, comes from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Marcus was ahead of me, moving fast. I remember watching his shadow stretch and shift along the wall as we turned corners. I kept trying to convince myself this was fine. Just one more hallway. We'd hear them around the next bend. But then everything stopped. I don't mean we stopped walking. I mean it was like the entire building just froze. That's when I heard it. A scream. A woman's scream. High and raw and painful in a way that didn't sound like a joke. Didn't sound like someone trying to scare us. It was the kind of scream that comes out when something's actually happening to someone. Something bad. I stopped moving. I didn't even process that I had. I was just stuck. It felt like it was coming from the floors above us, but it could have been right behind the next door. The way the sound bounced around, there was no way to know. All I knew was that it didn't belong in a building that hadn't housed a patient in years. When it finally cut off, the silence after felt worse. Heavy, like the walls had sucked it in. Like whatever had made that sound had just vanished, but the air was still holding its breath. I didn't say anything to Marcus. I think he was frozen too. Whatever that was, it didn't feel like something we were supposed to hear. I don't remember who ran first. I really don't. It's like someone flinched, and then suddenly all of us were moving fast, full sprint, down the stairs, back toward that grimy corridor we came through earlier. The sound of feet slapping against concrete, someone gasping, someone else cursing under their breath. The whole group just broke into this panicked mess without even deciding to. I ended up near the back again. I always do. I don't know if that's just bad luck or something about me, but it felt like the slowest place in the world. We hit the lower floor and headed straight for the window we'd crawled in through. One by one, guys were pushing themselves up and out, falling onto the grass on the other side without a word. I was just about to climb out when I heard it. Footsteps. Not ours. These were coming from inside, from the stairs. Heavy, fast. I didn't look. I couldn't. My hands were shaking as I pushed myself through that busted window frame, half expecting something to grab my ankle before I hit the ground. We bolted through the woods, barely staying on the path. No one talked. I could hear branches snapping, twigs catching on clothes, breathing way too loud. It was like our bodies didn't stop running even after we hit the open field where we'd parked. Back at the cars, it was weirdly quiet. Everyone hunched over, catching their breath, glancing around like maybe someone was missing, like maybe something followed us. I told them about the figure in the hallway, about where the scream came from. No one really responded. Just blank faces and this quiet dread. We left not long after. I never went back. I didn't want to know what that place really was. You ever have one of those places in your hometown that just feels wrong? Not in a haunted house kind of way, more like the kind of wrong you don't have words for. There was a house like that near where I used to live. Everyone just called it the Shell. It wasn't even finished. Like someone started building it, got as far as framing the walls and throwing up some drywall, then just bailed. No for sale sign, no construction tape. It was just there. It sat empty for years right in the middle of this already pretty sketchy block. Most of the houses on that street looked like they'd been forgotten too. Overgrown yards, broken fences, old cars with flat tires in the driveways. It always felt like a part of the neighborhood people avoided, even if no one ever really talked about it. Me and my friends used to joke about it when we drove past. Like, dare you to go inside, or bet there's some weirdo living in there. Dumb stuff. But it was always just that, jokes. Thing is, you can only joke about something for so long before someone actually does it. I wasn't planning on that night being the night. It was just a random late-night food run. Nothing to do, nowhere to be. One of us brought it up. We were already nearby, already bored, and before I could think too hard about it, we were pulling up the street. The shell was still there, still empty, or at least, it looked that way. Funny how easy it is to walk towards something when you're sure nothing's going to happen. It was way past midnight when we ended up there. One of those nights that just kind of drifts. No plan, just driving around town, passing fries between us, music low, windows halfway down. It was me, Nate, Aaron, and Bree, the usual group. I honestly don't remember who said it first, but someone brought up the shell, just floated the idea like it was nothing. We should finally check that place out. Nobody really pushed back. I think we were all in that weird, restless mood where you just want something to happen, even if it's something dumb. We parked maybe 3 houses down from it. The street was dead quiet. One flickering streetlight cast just enough light to make everything else seem darker. Some of the houses still had cars in the driveway, but not a single window was lit. It was like the whole block had just turned off. Walking up to the house felt like sneaking into some place you're not even sure is real. The shell looked worse up close, peeling wood, an unfinished second floor, exposed beams, windows covered in grime. We tried the front door first, locked, obviously. But then we circled around, and one of the side windows just slid open. No effort, no squeak. Like someone had opened it recently. Like it had been left open on purpose. Erin was the first to climb in. She was always the bold one. Nate helped her up and then she disappeared inside. A second later, the back door creaked open from the inside. Unlocked. That probably should have been enough to make us rethink the whole thing. But we just looked at each other and walked in like it was nothing. Like it wasn't weird at all that a house abandoned for years had an open window and an unlocked door. Walking inside, I expected dust, maybe some broken glass. Definitely that old musty stink abandoned places usually have. But it wasn't like that. Not really. There wasn't any furniture, sure, but the rooms on the first floor were weirdly intact. The walls looked clean. The floors weren't covered in debris, no graffiti, no animal droppings. It felt like someone had actually been taking care of it in some quiet, secret way. I remember thinking the house looked paused more than abandoned, like whoever started building it just stepped out for a bit and never came back. We didn't stick together once we were in. Nate drifted off into one of the hallways. Erin started opening every door she could find like she was looking for something. Bree was cracking jokes, trying to keep it light. That's how she is when things start feeling off. She leans into it, laughs louder. I broke away and went upstairs. The second floor was a different world. Everything felt raw up there. Exposed wood beams, insulation hanging in spots like wet cotton, no paint on the walls. The stairs creaked under every step, and even though I was trying to move quietly, it felt like I was stomping. There was no furniture up there either. Just open framework in half-finished rooms. No signs of squatters, no signs of life. But I kept getting that crawling feeling, like I wasn't really alone. No wind, no creaks beyond my own. Just silence. I stood at the top of the stairs for a long moment, listening. My heart had started beating harder, and I couldn't figure out why. There was nothing up there, just construction scraps and cold air. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Like the upstairs didn't belong to the same house. At the end of the upstairs hallway, I found a door that wouldn't budge. Not locked. Not jammed from warped wood or anything like that, just stuck. Like something heavy was leaning against it on the other side. I remember pressing my hand flat against it, feeling this weird tension like the door was pushing back. There was this narrow sliver where the frame didn't quite meet the wall, and I tried peeking through. Not much light, just enough from the hallway behind me to catch a glimpse of the inside. And what I saw, it didn't sit right. The walls in there were marked up badly, like deep, frantic scratches, too jagged for water damage, too random to be from tools left behind during construction. It looked like someone had clawed at them. The ceiling light was hanging low on its wire, tilted at an angle. The glass cracked, but it wasn't the damage that bothered me. It was the feeling, that sense you get in your gut when you walk into a room and just know something happened there. I couldn't tell if someone had tried to hole up in that space, or if someone else had tried to keep them out. Either way, it didn't feel like just another abandoned room. I stood there for a while, trying to decide if I should call the others, but I didn't. I don't even know why. Maybe I didn't want to say it out loud. Maybe I thought if I kept it to myself, it wouldn't feel as real. So I walked away. Just like that. Left the door, the scratches, the questions behind me. Even now, I still think about that room, about whatever might have been behind that door and why it felt like it didn't want me to know. There was a door tucked beneath the staircase, half hidden behind some exposed framing. I don't know what made me open it. Curiosity, maybe. Or that quiet pull that sometimes makes you do something you instantly regret. The second I cracked it open, the smell hit me. It wasn't just that stale, trapped air you get in old basements. This was something sharper, sour, like something had rotted and never been dealt with. Still, I went down, one step at a time, hands skimming the wall to keep steady. The air felt heavier with every step, and cold, way colder than it should have been. The stairs creaked under me, and the dim light from upstairs barely reached the bottom. Most of the basement was swallowed in shadow. This part of the house felt different, not just older or more run-down, forgotten in a different way. The kind of forgotten where no one had been down there in a long time, but somehow it still felt occupied. There was a wooden chair in one corner, just sitting there, facing the wall like someone had been put in timeout and never let up. Next to it, a tiny table. On the table, a Bible. The floor had these wide, rusty stains that stretched from the chair outward, like something had spilled and just sat there. I kept telling myself it was paint, old water damage, rust, anything, but it didn't look like paint. And the longer I stared at it, the more I felt like I was standing in the middle of something I wasn't supposed to see. I didn't touch anything, didn't get any closer. I just backed up the stairs, slow and quiet, like if I made too much noise, whatever was down there might remember I was there. I was halfway up the basement steps when I heard it. Footsteps behind me. Not loud, not rushed, just a couple of slow, deliberate steps. I figured maybe Bray or Nate had followed me down, maybe to mess with me. So I called out, casual but quiet. Nothing, no response. That's when I looked back. She was sitting in the far corner of the basement, against the wall near that same wooden chair, legs pulled up, arms around her knees, head tilted like she'd been watching me the whole time. Her hair was long and tangled, hanging down like a curtain. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I didn't need to. The way she was sitting, too still, too composed, like she belonged there and I didn't. I have no idea how I didn't see her when I came in. She hadn't moved, not once. My chest tightened before I could even think. That creeping numb panic that starts in your spine and works its way into your breath. I didn't know what I was looking at, but every part of me was screaming to get out. Then I heard it, Aaron screaming from upstairs. Sharp, sudden, panicked. And Nate yelling my name like he didn't care who else heard. That snapped me out of it. I didn't say anything, didn't try to make sense of what I saw. I just bolted up the stairs, taking two at a time, not even daring to look back. I still think about her sometimes, the way she just sat there, like she'd been waiting, like the house had never really been empty. We didn't even speak until we were back in the car. Doors locked, engine running like it could save us. It was dead quiet, except for everyone breathing too hard and looking out the windows like someone might follow. Bri finally said it, barely got the words out. She and Aaron had seen them. Two men, just standing in one of the rooms downstairs. No movement, no talking, just watching. She said they weren't even in the shadows. They were standing dead in the middle of the room. I still don't get it. I've tried to make sense of it 100 times. Were they squatting there? Maybe. But then why stand there like that? Why no reaction when they saw people in the house? Was it a setup? A trap? That room upstairs with the door barricaded. It didn't look like someone had left. It looked like someone had tried to stay safe, and the woman in the basement. She didn't say anything, didn't move, like she didn't care or couldn't. The whole thing just snowballed the more I thought about it. The smell, the Bible, that rust-colored stain on the floor that wasn't rust, the barricaded door, those men. I don't live in that town anymore. Moved states a few months after all that. Never told my family what happened, and I've never looked up that house again. Not seriously, not really, but last time I saw it on Street View, it was still there, still unfinished, just sitting. I don't know what was going on in there. I just know I was never supposed to see it, and I'm not going back to find out.